Hello. Everybody's heard the happiness isms that are floating around out there. For every minute you're angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness. Folks are usually about as happy as they make up their minds to be. Being happy never goes out of style. The purpose of our lives is to be happy. Happiness is not by chance, but by choice. Don't worry, be happy. This is the happiness episode on Hug Me, I'm Insane. My name is Perry Johnson. So I need to own that it took me a while to get this episode finished. I started and then I stopped and then I procrastinated. I procrastinated for quite a while, actually. I haven't put out an episode in a couple of weeks. One, because I redid my website. It was overdue for an overhaul. And it looks really good right now. If you want to check it out, it's perryjohnson.ca. But also, I've had it in mind to do an episode on happiness and what constitutes happiness. But I was feeling somewhat inauthentic in doing this episode because I've been wrestling with my own idea of happiness and am I happy right now? Like I've been asking myself that question. And one of the things that I've been wrestling with is feeling somewhat disjointed and disconnected. Despite the fact that I'm speaking to people regularly, I've been still lately feeling somewhat isolated. And I don't know if this is a byproduct of COVID or the fact that I work from home a lot or what it is exactly. But it got me thinking as to the definition of happiness and the ways that we talk about it, the vernacular of happiness in our society, and also our desire for happiness. It's not uncommon to hear somebody say, and you may have said this yourself, all I want is to be happy. And so what does that mean? So we're going to talk about that. So if you research a clinical/psychological definition of happiness, you'll come across one definition which breaks down happiness as a factor of three elements. What they describe as the pleasant life, which is enjoying life's daily pleasures, taking walks, partnership, all that kind of stuff. The good life, which is using skills for enrichment. And a meaningful life, which is contributing to the greater good. When I reflect on that definition of happiness, I realize that, once again, the English language is wholly inadequate in describing this one thing that we describe as happiness, much in the same way our language does not adequately describe love, or even snow, for that matter. So when I look at that clinical or psychological definition of happiness and break it down, the way that it lands for me is what they describe as the pleasant life, which is enjoying life's daily pleasures. That to me is contingent on the other two areas also being in proper balance. As usual, everything always comes back to balance. In other words, I'm going to enjoy the pleasant life less if I'm not contributing to the greater good and I'm not using my skills and intellect to further pursue the enrichment of my life or the betterment of my life or learning new skills. Similarly, if I'm spending all my time doing service and not spending any time on myself to enjoy my family and my friends and to basically stop and smell the roses, I can get out of balance that way. So you can see how this three-way interaction is a symbiotic relationship. Okay, so that's that definition. And from the standpoint of what they're talking about, the idea of happiness, or what they call the pursuit of happiness, makes sense by way of that definition. And so then I reflect on my own relationship with happiness and the disconnect between what I was describing as the pursuit of happiness versus feeling happy. And I differentiate those in my mind in very specific ways. And what I've come to understand as what they describe as the pursuit of happiness, I actually describe my aspirations as the pursuit of serenity, and grace and humility and feeling a sense of freedom. And by freedom, I mean not feeling that I'm trapped in any area of my life, which ties back to one of my core spiritual beliefs, which is that everything is here to help me, and all my experiences are coming by way of opportunities to teach me something about myself and about the world at large. And that's one of the ways that I will leverage my spiritual skills as a way of enriching what they describe as the good life. So I continue to remain open to seeing what it is that I need to heal, because I know very, very well that the more that I can go in and heal myself, the more serenity and simplicity and freedom I achieve, which in turn puts me in a much better place to contribute and to nurture the meaningful life, because that puts me in a position of being much better positioned to help you, which in turn makes me feel good, which brings about a greater sense of purpose. Basically, I'm talking about service. And actually, how they describe service as being the meaningful life, I actually, in a way, like that definition better, because, I don't know, service has always had this sort of ring to it that's never really been a particular sexy term to me, even though I understand its value and its importance and it's an integral part of my life. But that's just my own shit, and it actually has nothing to do with anything, and it's just semantics. So let's keep going here. So I want to come back to the idea of the feeling versus the state of happiness. I know that for myself, for many, many years, and by many years, I mean most of my adult life, well, not most of my adult life, much of my adult life, I would gauge my success by the amount I was feeling elation or joy or serenity or peace or glee or all of the positive emotions. And yet I was spending a great deal, if not most of my time, embroiled in guilt and shame and anger and hopelessness and despair. And this was by way of a lot of default stories that I was hauling around, and some early trauma, and a healthy dose of getting my ass kicked by my addiction. And so early recovery to me represented the promise of feeling happier. And I make that distinction there. The feeling of happiness, in my mind, was something that I was very much invested in pursuing and achieving. Here's the thing. My feeling that happiness is exactly that. It's just the feeling. And sometimes life will present situations that push me into despair or hopelessness or anger or guilt or shame or whatever it is. And so what I've instead learned to do is two things. Number one, validate whatever the feeling is, because it's just what I'm feeling. And I'm going to feel what I feel regardless of whether or not I like it. I'm just feeling it. It's just a feeling, and it will change. Number two, much of what I'm feeling is contingent on the action that I'm taking in my day-to-day. And the stories and systems and methodologies that I have in place that are driving those actions and those routines. And the thing to remember is that I have a set of systems that yield me consistent results. The systems are perfect. They always give me the same result. But if I don't like the result, change the system. And by doing that, by becoming objective and going in and looking at all the ways in which Perry operates and the languaging that I use with myself and the belief systems that I have about the world and about myself dictate how I feel in the world. And so if I'm coming from a place of being the victim, where life is always handing me a shit sandwich and bad things always happen to me, and Why do I always get partners who consistently treat me like shit? Why do I attract dickheads? Why do I this? Why that? Well, the answer is simple. I believe that's what I deserve. There's a belief system in me that is manifesting that stuff. And that's a very painful realization, and one which many people are enormously resistant to take on board. But once I began to slowly change how I viewed myself and therefore the world, those beliefs began to change. And the people that I was attracting into my life as a result of that also began to change. And some of those dysfunctional relationships began falling away because I was energetically no longer aligned with those paradigms. It's that leveling up thing. So the more positive action, positive loving action that I take on behalf of Perry and Perry's life, the more positive and loving Perry is in life. It's reciprocal. Some of you out there are nodding in approval, and this is resonating as true for you, and others are not ready to hear this, and will probably arrive at the conclusion that this is a bunch of bullshit, and you probably aren't even listening to this podcast anymore. And I get that. It's a journey, and the fact that we are incredibly powerful manifestors is not the way that we're taught. It's not the way that we're raised. But getting back to the topic of happiness, I know that in healing a lot of the stuff that was conspiring to hold me back and defeat me in my life, which I did not see operating, after going in and healing a lot of that stuff and creating that space, that openness, that freedom, that allowed me to then move forward in pretty much whatever way I wanted. And that is a very exciting and empowering concept, to realize that at any moment I can create myself a blank canvas. And it has nothing to do with completely changing the canvas, but everything to do with how I'm looking at the canvas. One person might go in and see all the ridges and all the lines in there and the fact that the canvas is made of cloth, and somebody else will just look at a white square, and somebody else will see a blank square, and somebody else won't see anything at all other than possibility. And all of those things are true. It all comes down to if you make it true. The key to all of this in talking about this pursuit of happiness and am I happy and all of that is also in the allowing. A really vital aspect to this concept of creating happiness, what we term happiness in our lives, is in the allowing, the willingness to meet ourselves and the people in our lives wherever they're at. And to be kind and to be forgiving, to allow others and to allow ourselves to make mistakes, because we're going to make them. I make them all the time. And the people that I love make them all the time. And me condemning or criticizing them or myself or being hard on myself is only holding me in that shame-based place of you're a fuck up, you're a loser. Whereas what I need is understanding and love and acceptance of whatever it is that's going on and whatever state I happen to be in. And one of the things that's really helped me in doing this is practicing gratitude. And gratitude journals are excellent for this. And it's a really, really simple exercise, only takes a couple of minutes, but get a book and every day write down 3 things that you're grateful for. And I actually will do this when I take my walks. I will practice this sort of walking meditation of, as I'm going along, looking at something and recognizing that thing that's in my path or on my journey. And sometimes even practicing not naming that thing. Getting away from convention and just noticing the leaf without calling it the leaf, or the tree or the bird or the whatever, the sidewalk even sometimes. I'll notice the sidewalk and recognize that it's taking me on a path and that it's serving a purpose in my life. And it sounds ridiculously simple, even overly simplified. But what that does is it keeps me focused on the now. It's an opportunity for me to practice mindfulness in yet another way, where I'm not freaking out about what might happen or pulling myself down by what has happened, because I have neither of those things. All I have is this very moment. And in this very moment, my life is pretty damn good. So I hope you guys got something out of that. And until the next time, I'll see you soon.